What are your best Bitcoin privacy tips?
I guess the kind of high level tips might be, as an example, you might think about having some Bitcoin acquired through non KYC sources. So, and I understand, like, you could theoretically, you could have some coins that were, on a KYC exchange, and some coins that were, let's say, not, or earned outside of that. So that's an example. Another example might be using a VPN on your phone and things like this. That said, I don't see myself as like a perfect privacy advocate or whatever. My thoughts on it are a little kind of nuanced in the sense that I think it's certainly there are certain products that might help you achieve privacy from a certain actor, but I think a lot of people get drawn into this idea of, I need to try to be private from everyone, and in practice the cost and the convenience that you will pay for that, it's often not worth it for a lot of people. I'm not against it. I just think in practice, there'll be a lot of people where, trying to be, James Bond or whatever, like it's just might not be feasible for people. So in practice, I guess don't shoot the messenger is the way I'm trying to say this, is people have sometimes unrealistic ideas about how private the society could be that they live in. Whereas in practice, there may be societies where, there's a trade-off there that you may not like it, but there's a lot of surveillance, and that's how they make it safe, as an example. Think about Singapore or other
Right.
places, or you could even argue about the UAE as well. So I'm not anti-privacy, but I just think in practice, it may not happen the way people think. Now, certainly in certain specific cases, people might use VPNs or whatever. And in certain countries, you're not meant to use them, right? So that's the other thing. So I'm not advocating anyone break the law here, but there are different techniques and tools. So things like CoinJoin, I know recently there's been some trouble in that in the Bitcoin world with, the US government going after Samurai Whirlpool. But join market still exists as an option. I know people are still doing Wasabi, even though they shut down, or at least they voluntarily shut down. And I think there are still maybe some other coordinators operating for that. So I think using Lightning as well, although not perfect, I think Lightning privacy is improving as well. I think the difficulty, though, is that in many cases, our names and addresses are stored on various databases, and the government can just look those up. Or if you're like a private investigator, maybe they have access to some of these databases in a legal way. So then in practice, it's just difficult. Now, there are certain steps you can take. As I said, having non-KYC coins, maybe you're using a VPN, maybe you're using like a mailbox service to kind of mask your mailing address. Maybe you're cautious about what details you give up online, or maybe you're cautious about what things you say on social media, right? I'll give an example. I think sometimes people's desire to flex or to flaunt, or maybe it's kind of an ego thing, they sort of disclose a lot more online on their social media than they need to. Now, it's one thing, let's say, if you are, let's say, a public person, and you have to, because you're talking about products, or you just you're advocating, or it's part of your job. But for a lot of people, if it's not their job, then maybe they can be a bit more cautious about exactly what are they disclosing. Of course, even for me, like quote unquote public in some loose sense, I'm still cautious about exactly what I say online or publicly. But yeah, it's a complicated subject, and it takes a lot of sort of understanding these different nuances of who are you trying to be private from, what's actually realistic in terms of the privacy that you can achieve. Like maybe you can get privacy from, let's say, just a random Google search or a random person online. But if somebody's like going to the level of hiring a private investigator, or it's a government, then it's a very different conversation about how do you achieve privacy in that context. So I think it's just understanding what are you trying to be private from, and what price are you willing to pay in terms of monetary cost or convenience aspects as well.